Hello, and welcome to the greatest movie ever podcast, where we dissect our guests' favourite film in all its silver screen cinematic scope. This week, I'm joined by fellow podcaster and host of Watching the Watchmen, in which me and him, we analyse the graphic novel The Watchmen. We've just finished the book, so make sure you go and check that out. He also hosts a podcast called Battle Rap Resume and Alpha Metallica. The former, which interviews battle rappers from around the world, and the latter, which works through Metallica's back catalogue. He's a great guy with a lovely sounding voice. Tom, how's it going?
Def, hello. It is great to be on here. I love your work, not least the ones that I guest on, and also when you explain the ending of. I'm pretty sure I went on your channel, and I went on just for there, and you've done like an ending explained, and I recognise the fun now because it was some shitty Netflix film my girlfriend watched the other day about some fat girl pretending to be a thin girl. What was that called? I can't remember what that was called.
Sierra Burgess and The Big Loser.
That's it. I mean, maybe one day some millennial in the future will do a podcast like this and Sierra Burgess will be their film. I don't know if you've watched it, but it was bad. It was bad.
I watch a lot of shit movies, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen my End and Explain videos. So pretty much, at the moment, I'm just trying to do every single movie that comes out to just throw as much shit at the wall and see which sticks. Mm-hmm. Some of them do really well, but then you've got like Selfie from Hell, which I thought would do well, but it's on about 400 views.
Yeah.
So go listen to that one, listeners. Don't watch the movie, just listen to that anyway. But how, Tom, does it feel to be on the other end of the mic for once?
It's unusual. Yeah, I want to take command. I want to start reading off Twitters, etc. But I'm happy to be on the other end. Sometimes. In cinema, it's good to be the audience member. It's good to receive, I guess, sometimes.
Definitely in cinema, because we'd probably be shit at directing a movie, Tom. We're shit at doing podcasts together, so I can't imagine what a movie would be like. Anyway, today, the film that we're going to be discussing is 12 Angry Men. When I first started kind of organising this podcast, I messaged about 30 people and who all wanted to be on the show and was like, what's your favourite movie? And I've kind of tried to structure the order of the podcast in sort of a different genre every episode. 12 Angry Men, it's actually the only film on the list that I've never actually seen.
Right.
Till now, which was a weird one for me, because obviously I watch a lot of films. And it's also one that's often listed as one of the greatest films ever made, on pretty much most lists. So when did you first become aware of the film?
Yeah, it was through the list that I became aware of it. So I'd always really been into and still are into like dialogue heavy movies, bottle movies, things that are in one place, like Dinner for Andre or the Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, that Julia Delphi Ethan Hawke trilogy, and Boiler Room, with Ben Affleck and those sort of movies. So I'd always enjoyed those sort of movies. And I remember going on IMDb.
Die Hard.
Die Hard, exactly. Monsters Inc. And I remember going on to the top 250 and pretty much knowing all the films. I've got it in front of me now. And if you read, so this is the top 10. So it's Fight Club, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Pulp Fiction, Return of the King, Schindler's List, 12 Angry Men, and then we have Dark Knight, Godfather 1 and 2, and Shawshank. And 12 Angry Men does stick out as the sore thumb there. I'd never heard it before. I remember seeing it in 2009. That was back when I used to work at McDonald's, and I became friends with Nathaniel, who's now still one of my great friends, huge movie guy. And I remember us two just bugging out over this movie. I watched it, and I was just floored by it, really. And watching it back in the last few days, I still regard it highly. I don't know if it's like my favourite film ever, but it's. I don't know if I have a favourite film, but it's definitely one that I enjoy a hell of a lot. So I watched it in about 2009. Gradually, been rewatching it through the years. Like my electrician Chav brother, I remember showing him this film a few years ago when we were on holiday. Even he liked it, Def. I think it's one of those films that cuts through and the quality is quite evident.
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't originally a film. It had quite a lot of success before getting adapted. Yeah. It is actually a play. And it basically, the movie of the story is. It's a jury made up of 12 men, and they're deliberating the conviction or acquittal of a defendant based on the basis of reasonable doubt. which it kind of forces the jurors to question their own morals and values. And it's very thought-provoking. There's not really a right or wrong answer. There's outside of the room, we don't get much development in terms of the crime itself or the person who's being persecuted for it or even the victims. But it's still regarded really highly. Why do you think this has had such a legacy to it?
For me, it's the purity of the thing. It's the story-wise, you can poke some holes in it, and some of the logic that we'll get into that they go through. I found myself being a little spurious at it, actually. And I think I said to you before we did the episode, there's quite a few articles out there that are convinced that they let a guilty man go free. Essentially, like it doesn't really add up. For me, it's the acting. That's what I've always enjoyed with cinema. And moving back, I like seeing all these 12 guys play with each other. I like the ratcheting tension, and I like bottle cinema. I like things that take place in literally one room. I mean, you could argue they go to the bathroom as well at points, and we see them when they're sitting on the sort of the bench and the steps at the beginning and the end. But I think the legacy, the reason why it shines through, the reason why any of these old films shine through is twofold. It's both the charm, that this is from 1957, 60 odd years old, but it's still so shining, so bright, so effective. But the themes as well, it just makes you quite skeptical, and quite questioning. And I think that all of us in this realm, even though we haven't been watching the case over 6 or 7 days, however long they've been in there, we just get the play-by-play. You pretty much are convinced that he's guilty from the off, and Fonda is working against you. You are the dough in his hands. And it's just quite an enjoyable experience, really. Even when I'm rewatching it, you're measuring up, and you're keeping tabs on what people think and who they are and where they turn, guilty or not guilty. Like, one of the things that I didn't even realise when I rewatched it the other day was the ad man, the Don Draper-like figure who's not very focused. He actually switches his verdict quite a few times. He goes guilty, non-guilty, guilty, non-guilty. And I don't know. I like the scorekeeping aspect of it, and I just think all the performances across the board are fantastic. I guess you could argue that the villain of the piece, the guy who rips up the photo of his son at the end, Lee J. Cobb, he's a huge actor in his time. He was in on the Waterfront. He was the guy who originally played Willie Loman in the original Broadway staging of Death of a Salesman. I think all of the actors are excellent in it, and I just like seeing them work.
Yeah, definitely. And the film itself, it's really well shot and put together, especially for the time. I watched it on Blu-ray, upscale to 4K. Surprisingly, Tom, not a good transfer. No. But we'll let them off. I had just watched The Revenant in 4K before it, but we'll let them off with that. And let's just get into the film itself. We've kind of talked about the background of it, but it opens on a courtroom, which is one of the only scenes that takes place outside of the jurors' room. And we pan across the characters, and it's sort of a great opener that slowly introduces you to what I'll call the 12 Angry White Men. Yep. Or the Gammon, as it would be known today.
I guess there's a foreigner in the mix, though. They're not all white, but yeah.
Yeah, so which one's the foreigner? Because I took them all as... I know there's a guy who says he's from the slums.
The watchmaker.
Right.
I believe he's meant to be Italian, and that gets brought up. My favourite character, the belligerent baseball fan, sort of mocks him for it towards the end. Who has some of the best lines in the movie. I just love that guy, definitely. Straight out of the 50s. But I love the courtroom steps, the grand imposing edifice. I love the tracking shot as well, because there's a lot of subtle cinematography going on throughout. Obviously, it's kind of like sixth form analysis, how we get closer as the film goes on, and we get loads of close stuff. But I like how we see the life outside the courtroom. I like how we see a case that has gone well, where the husband and wife are embracing in tears, overjoyed, and then we move over to the window. And I like how we see the accused, who's kind of this blanket that we can imprint ourselves onto. Like, he kind of looks Jewish, he kind of looks Turkish. I mean, it's made of a lot. There's a lot of racism in this film. There's a lot of prejudice from the jurors.
Yeah, I do really like it, and they kind of he's in the film for very little, but he did leave quite a lasting impression on me. There's a lot going on in his face. He looks really fearful. He does. He looks really scared for his life, but then you're kind of looking at him thinking, is that guilt or is it because he's got caught? And he just knows that his life is in their hands. And they reach the room and they all kind of slowly sit down, and it looks like it's a pretty open and shut case. Everyone's made their mind up from the looks of it. And then Fonda, he sticks his bloody nose in it. And he just kind of derails it all. It would have been great if it had just been like a 10-minute movie where they all just go in and decide that he's guilty. But Fonda, was Fonda messing around.
Look, Fonda's the go, and I want to point to as well anyone who wants another 12 Angry Men style film with Fonda in it. There's a great western called The Oxbow Incident, which is pretty much 12 Angry Men as a western. It's set in a saloon where they're debating whether to hang a man, and it's a very good film as well. And
does he just do these movies where they just debate killing people?
Yeah, just 12 Angry Cowboys. It's great. The music as well by Kenyon Hopkins, very subtle, but I love the theme. I love that delicate string theme. It's very pensive.
Yeah, definitely. And there's another little nice touch in there, Tom. They walk into the room and one of the guys locks the door. And they go, one of them, I can't remember who.
It's it's a slum guy, yeah.
Right, okay. He goes, I never knew they locked the door. Which kind of shows that they feel a bit trapped in the situation.
Yep.
Like they're trapped in this room. And the characters, they don't even really go to the verdict straight away. They all kind of chat to themselves, and it shows their hands almost in advance and what way they're kind of going to go in the film. Some are even excited at the fact that they're going to be sending a man to his death.
Yep.
And there's a real detachment from it. And it really reminded me of something that I studied in university, which is something that's called distance killing, that was really brought to life under the Nazis. The Nazis basically did psychological studies where they learned that firing squads could often be traumatizing for the shooter, which is then where they started using blanks in some of the rifles, so that some people could kind of walk away and believe that they weren't the killer, they were just there. And then the Nazis really took it to the next level with poisoning. So a soldier in a concentration camp would stand on top of a roof and simply just tip a lever to kill hundreds of people at a time. And they didn't call them soldiers, they called them sanitation officers to kind of get away from thinking that they were murderers. And this sort of ease in murder is what I'm kind of reminded about when I see how gleeful that most of the people in this room are about just killing a man, because they know they're not going to have to get their hands dirty, they're not going to have to participate in it, they just have to decide whether someone dies or not. And it's distance killing for me, and it's great to see this sort of dark personalities that we have in this room taking joy from wanting to murder someone.
Yeah, one of them says, "Lucky to get a murder case." You know, you're right. They're enjoying the prospect, and some of the best early lines are from, I'm just going to call him Baseball Guy. When the other old man villain, not necessarily Lee J. Cobb's figure, the one who everyone turns their back on at the end when he's horrifically racist, when he blows his nose and he's like, "The horn works, now try the lights." It's like, I want to get that into conversation. I want to start saying that when anyone sneezes around me. But I think the development of all of the characters is expert. You know, there's 12 characters in this room. That's hard to get across. And I would argue pretty much all of them are individual. The only one who maybe isn't that individual is the kind of tough guy who stands up for the old man. I don't think he's as carved as well. But they're all interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And they all kind of leave their mark in some way. And I quite like when they start deliberating that even Fonda, he doesn't really say that he's not guilty. He just says that he doesn't know. And he thinks there's a doubt, which this whole movie is sort of based around the US verdict of, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, which I don't think it's that common in this country. But basically the US justice system believes that if a crime seems to be beyond a reasonable doubt that the person could have perpetrated it, then you shouldn't say that they're guilty. But Fonda just says he doesn't know, which plays into that. And he starts them off by just saying, look, we'll have an hour debate. And if by that we can't decide, then I'll let you go home early. He doesn't say that, but, he acts like that. And symbolically, he wears white. And I
Yep.
think throughout this film, he's sort of the angelic character of this piece. He's sort of the angel on everyone's shoulder that stops them from giving into their darkest desires.
Yeah, and we get the switchblade invoked. I mean, it's like a play pretty much for all the props that we get taken out. It's just taking place in this one room, and it could be boring if not for the the vivid nature of the script. And I just think it moves along at a great pace in 90 minutes. Like it's not that cinematic really of a film. Like, as mentioned, like Before Sunrise, always reminds me a little bit of Clerks. Kind of anti-cinema, just sort of dwelling in these locations. Although there is an artistry, but behind the camera. And I was actually reading about Sidney Lumet, who's basically saying, the director, who's an incredible director, did like Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon. He did a really good film with Philip Seymour Hoffman, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. I think that was his last film in the early 2000s. And he basically said, quote, "I shot the first third of the movie above eye level, shot the second third at eye level, and the last third from below eye level. In that way, towards the end, the ceiling began to appear. Not only were the walls closing in, the ceiling was as well. The sense of increasing claustrophobia did a lot to raise the tension of the last part of the movie. In the film's last shot," he observed, he used a wide-angle lens to let us finally breathe. And, I guess with a film like this, less so with, say, he did Alien beforehand, we kind of have to go what we did on Watchmen here and sort of recount the plot, because it's such a linear film in that way. But, I just love the dialogue. I love the way it walks through. And he is a bit of a White Knight fonder, but never to any irritating extent. I think it's healthy, the level of skepticism he's exhibiting.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of do get that feeling that his debate is healthy, especially when we go around the room and everyone gives their reasons. And it's all sort of based on prejudices and guesses. And the witness is the one thing that this case really hinges on. And what I do like about it is every character is so consistent throughout. They all sort of stick to their guns for quite a while, which really makes you feel like Fonda has a struggle ahead of him. And no one really does anything out of place throughout the movie. Everything ramps up, but it all feels natural in its progression. And it's a real testament to the writing, how well the characters become developed. Because, often in movies, if a character does something drastic or drastically changes their mind in the opposite direction, it can be a bit jarring. But here it just feels completely natural throughout the entire film. And it's just really well written.
Yeah, it is expertly written. I love how they're all developed as they go through. And there's lots of sort of tactile things in the film. A lot of the evidence that they talk about, I like how when they get into the thing about the old man taking the steps, and they measure, and then the camera goes down low behind Fonda's foot, and they're all debating, they're all arguing. And look, there's never any time where the characters are necessarily silent. Like, whenever they bring up a good point, there's always two or three to say, what the fuck, what does that mean? What does that matter? You know what I mean? Like, I don't agree with you. There's always a solid roadblock that I really appreciate. And lots of nice twists as well. Like, there's a bit when they talk about, no one could be that sure in facts. What can you do? It's like, exactly, and when they're talking about, I'm going to kill you, and then the villain says it to Fonda, it's like, I love those sort of twists as well that go through. And we get so many close-ups. We get so many just character face on screen. And I just love it. I think the way they're staged is fantastic. And they've all got very classic, 1957 faces.
Yeah, definitely. And they've sort of... It's costumed really well as well. And throughout the film, as the room gets hotter, the sweat patches start to appear and people start to undress in their clothes, and it also heightens up how stressed out that they are throughout, just by having their clothes change very subtly. But it's just really the level of detail and the consistency that's kept through is absolutely brilliant. And I love the way that we sort of early on get a very much the classic debate of these kids today, speech from everyone, which is sort of a timeless argument. And I think that's one of the main reasons that this film still holds up. It really could be set in any decade and still work, because obviously the setting of a jury room, they're very private. You can't just go in with mobile phones and stuff. And it's great that it can still be relevant today. The crime that's committed is murder. The evidence that's given could be used today, and it's just a timeless piece, really. And we get the idea that one of them may fold early on, in that Fonda may be starting to chip away, just by the fact that he hands over the responsibility of delegating. And that to me kind of showed that he was willing to almost bend and break to things. And that's the first real crack that we get in their sort of guilty verdict.
Yeah, I love that guy. The actor's Martin Balsam, the guy who sort of coordinates all the votes, and we learn that he's a football coach later on. He has this like profound calmness about him that I find quite entrancing to watch. And as we go through, it's just such a fun prospect, really, because structurally, even the first time you watch this film, when it's 11-1, you know eventually it's going to be 12-0. And it's just compelling to see this go forward. And, the old man as well, the elderly man who's often shot in a wider frame, is often more the voice of reason than Fonda, really. And, them sitting next to each other is interesting. And we get so much about these characters when they go into the bathroom as well. And I really like when they go into the bathroom. There's lots of cool stuff that goes down there. Like when we learned that the baseball guy made like $27,000 selling marmalade. It's like, in 2018 money, that's crazy.
Yeah.
This motherfucker's a marmalade millionaire. We learn about the watchmaker and the advertisers. Fonda's an architect, of course. And I like how the guy in the garage, when they're drying their hands, he's like, yeah, but what if you're wrong? Like, and it leaves that possibility all the way open.
Yeah. And I think it is really like that. It's one of the tensest moments, because Fonda sort of comes to the realization that if he is wrong, then they're letting a man get away with murder, which is the true conflict of this film. It could just be one man coming out with his crazy conspiracy theories to convince the others he's right, and just battering them down till they agree. He's probably a flat earther, and he's just coming out with these conspiracy theories, and everyone's that they could potentially be letting a murderer go because he's just sort of beat them down with his theories. Do you think the guy did it, though?
Maybe, yeah. I probably do think he actually did do it. It's just, for me, it's just the coincidenceness. Like him saying, "I'm going to kill you," and someone kills you. It's like, okay, but tie that in with the knife, and tie that in with the movies. And I've read something online that tries to explain the movies thing, like, oh yeah, but in the 50s, not everyone knew movie stars. Yeah, they showed this sort of stuff and whatever. And it's like, I don't know, he could have had some sort of element. And I suppose the true kind of, if you go a bit deeper societally, it's saying even if he did do it, he didn't do it because he was beaten from such a young age, that he wasn't acting of his own agency. And that's kind of a deeper thing that they're asking here. And one of the things that I like is you have the jurors that are really engaged, like Fonda, like Lee J. Cobb, who've got their own personal grudges. You get the baseball guys who seem to literally change the decision because they want to go to the game. And then you get other people who aren't either really, like, they're not too engaged either. Even the slum guy who can identify with this world seems to be mostly on the fence and then goes one way or the other. And you're getting an eye into mob rule as well, aren't you? And sort of the mentality, the psychology of this room, how one person becomes more powerful and you gravitate towards them. And what about you? Did he do it?
Yeah, I think he did it. And the first clue for me was when he said that he didn't remember what movie he saw. I mean, for starters, there was only about 10 movies back then, Tom. And I'll tell you now, do not watch any of them in 4K.
Right.
But I don't think they put across a good enough argument of, like, who else could have done it instead. It all hangs on coincidence that all of these things were just kind of happenstance. But like, there's some arguments that like Fonda pulls out the same knife, which shows that it's a common weapon. But I don't know. There's actually a goof when they kind of do a crime reconstruction and time it, because it's all one shot. Now, in the film, they say it's 42 seconds, but if you actually time it, Tom, I didn't do this, but apparently it says so on the internet.
Right.
But if you actually time it, it's only 31 seconds, I think.
Okay.
So the timing's slightly off on it. I think the guy did it, and I think he's got away with murder.
And it's like we need to have explored why someone would want to kill the father anyway. Like, you know, did he have any enemies who would have actually gone and killed him? It's established maybe it's in a slightly bad neighborhood, but it's hard to believe someone would break into the house and do it. And I guess it's hinging as well on the old lady across the street with the glasses. And it is true that you wouldn't sleep with your glasses, but I wear glasses and you would just put them on and get up, like to look out the street. I don't think you'd look instinctively without them. But I think ultimately it's not really even about the murder. It's just about our susceptibility. You know, they say later, you know, what good are facts? You can twist and, you know, tire them all you like. And I just like seeing all these actors chew this great material going back and forth. And I love Lee J. Cobb, the villain of it. I think he's fantastic. I think he kind of shines in the piece. I think he absolutely commands, I want to say stage, but, you know, the camera or whatever. And it moves through, and it has these nice breaks in between where we get the votes in lots of different ways. At first, they verbalize them, then they write them down, and we get to see their handwriting. And I love the shot that's above them as they raise their hand. Yeah,
definitely. And so they do the first count again after the first hour. Surprise, surprise, it's 2 not guilty now. I really love Fonda's face as he realizes, like, he's finally winning. He finally realizes he's getting his little cousin out of jail. No, it's great, and it really highlights the acting in the film. Like, it is all Oscar worthy. Even today, it's just outstanding performances, and that moment kind of really seals it for me. And it's also shortly after this that when they do the countdown, we get our first close up of the old guy, played by Joseph Sweeney, who kind of gets a raw deal in this film. Like, people walk out of the room as he's talking. They call him old.
He gets like a bit of paper thrown at him by accident, but yeah.
Yeah, like, what I noticed, one character even coughs when he's talking.
Right.
They probably egged his house. You know, it's the usual way that you treat old people. But it's a great performance by Joseph Sweeney, and he's a really likable character. He gets so many close-ups as well. Like, every time he talks, his face just takes up the entire screen. Mm-hmm. I tell you what, Tom, when you're watching it on a 50-inch screen in 4K, Tom, seeing that old guy that close, it's not very nice. But we'll not fault it for it. Because the guy, he's just got a certain charisma about him. He's really mild-mannered, but he's also authoritative. Because he sort of commands the room, and he points down people's points, and he's just a great guy. Mm-hmm. Like, he shuts down the old man's. One of them shuts down his views, and it sort of reveals things about his personality. There's a great speech that he does where they're talking about one of the old men witnesses, and the old guy says, like, he probably wanted this moment to kind of shine, and because he knew everyone would be listening to him when he was on the witness stand, and he's probably a guy that everyone looks down on him and hates him and doesn't listen to what he says because he's an old man, and this is the chance to finally have his voice heard. And he makes that amazing point, and then one of the other jurors just kind of shouts him down like, "No, you're stupid."
Yep.
Which does just hammer home that the old guy's right in what he was saying. It's just a beautiful moment. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think the film oozes quality. You know, there's a reason why. It's still crazy to me that it's number 5 on the top 250 on IMDb. It really is an anomaly on that list. Like, the rest of these are just sort of pop, you know, great films, but just big pop culture films, really. And I think obviously it has, but I don't think it's had that much of an influence on pop culture. It doesn't get referenced much, does it? 12 Angry Men, in pretty much.
Not really. No,
I can't think of, because like I was on the Wikipedia and they were saying like, in The Simpsons, and apparently it's Veronica Mars. It gets a reference and stuff, but I can't think of any like giant homages. Apparently it's number 2 courtroom drama on AFI's top 10. I wonder what was number 1. I'll have to see that. But actually, I've just got it here. To Kill a Mockingbird, of course. To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah. Few Good Men's also on there. Of course. Kramer versus Kramer. The Verdict. Another Sidney Lumet film, actually. That's a good film with Paul Newman. But as we work through the film as well, everyone growing sweatier, everyone growing more aggrieved. They are angry people, you know. A lot of them get very het up.
Yeah, definitely. And there's just little one-liners that they do as well throughout that I really like. Like there's one of them goes, "He don't even speak good English," which is a brilliant line. That's like a comedic line, especially in the 50s. That's like cutting edge. And one by one, we all kind of see them change their minds and begin to think about things more openly. And Fonda's he's like a bit of a cult leader. He starts building this following, and it really heats up the dynamics. And you've got people getting more and more frustrated. People, especially the main villain, who he made his decision hours ago, and he's just sick of arguing it and shouting it and going back and forth. And even though it's all set in one room, it really ramps up and it makes it engaging, which it's hard for a lot of films that have multiple locations to do this, let alone one that's just set in a room to keep it constantly fresh and engaging. But it does a fantastic job, and even like everything down to the sweat patches, it's brilliant. Like I'm quite fascinated with crime investigation, and I watch a lot of documentaries on it all the time. And I love how even in the room they carry out a sort of mini investigation. They reenact it and they really break down the crime. They get blueprints out, and it's a really like forensic look at the crime itself. And it's then in that we have this moment as well that it all heats up and the villain goes, "I'll kill you," and turns the entire room against him.
Yeah,
as that was what one of the earlier arguments hinged upon. And things get dark and somber, and they all kind of stand about. And again, the dynamics change, and it's just a fantastic mood swing for the film. And it's at this moment where they're all kind of stand about, and the rain's pelting down, and they're just in silence, that it beautifully transitions into the third act. And this is where a lot of characters really get a moment to shine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we get a lot of those swinging transitions as well, like when the guy has that horrific, like when everyone turns their back on him as well, it feels a little stagey to me. I like it, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it definitely feels like what would happen in a theatre.
It doesn't feel
100%.
natural. I think most of the film does feel quite natural, and that kind of stands out as a little bit arch, a little bit exaggerated, but still enjoyable. And yeah, you're right, all the characters do get their own moments, and the interplay as well between so many of them. I'd like to see some sort of diagram, because I'm pretty sure every character talks to every character. I'm not entirely sure, but you know, it's mainly who's sitting next to who get to have these different moments. And another guy that I really like is the stockbroker, the uptight guy, one of the last guys changes verdict, the guy that gets quizzed on the movies and talks about the glasses as well. I think he's a really good actor, and you are just keeping points as you go through. And you know, it is really a remarkable film. It was his debut, Lumet's debut, which is crazy to me. Yeah, it was his first film. Again, for his first film to be one of these classics, and yeah, it's absolutely sensational. I think that he got everyone to read their lines over multiple times in the room on their own, and you know, they filmed it very quickly, and it has such a naturalistic feel as it walks out. And you know, the final thing that essentially swings it then is the eyeglasses. That's a distinct thing to catch.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think you would catch it in real life, to be honest. Because those marks, I mean, I wear glasses myself, and those marks, they fade after about 10 minutes, they're really small.
Yeah.
But we'll let them off, Tom, because it is raining, and we know it's the big fight scene because it's raining, and it's just all ramping up. And I like how Fonda sort of puts this guy's memory into question, and you get like a little bead of sweat rolling down. I mean, you know, I love the sweat patches, Tom.
Yep.
But you get a lovely bead of sweat just rolling down his head at this point, as he sort of breaks and realizes that, yeah, maybe this guy's memory is the same as mine, because he was quite prejudiced towards him not remembering the film, as we all were, Tom.
Yeah, but it's like he's like, oh, it was the delightful Miss Bainbridge. He's like, it was the amazing Miss Bainbridge. He's like, he remembered it was Miss Bainbridge. Like, give him a break.
He was probably asleep. He'd been sat in that cinema for 2 hours before watching another movie.
Yeah, double feature, Steez. Like, it was a little, again. But I'm not gonna poke holes in these kind of things. I hate people who poke holes in movies anyway. It's not really what it's about. But yeah. And then we get our sort of climax, I suppose. It's sort of like, you've got to think if he didn't have an emotional background, the Lee J. Cobb character with his son, who it's quite a cool background, like he saw his son get beat up and then he like broke his son in two and then his son fought him and then, you know, blah, 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 all these sort of things. A lot of classic American archetypes, father-son dynamics going down there. But it would have been nice if he was just a neutral guy who was like, no, I don't think he did it. I've got no emotional reason. I just don't think he did it. It wouldn't have made as you know, powerful denouement, as it were.
Yeah, I don't really get his motive or why he thinks that he did it so much. So is it just because he doesn't like his son and he sees his son in the criminal?
I guess it's the son who fought back successfully when his son never did. I guess he says he hadn't seen his son for years as well. So yeah, it's just him implanting himself on that archetype.
Okay.
I guess. And I love when he tears up the photo and instantly regrets it. And you know, his emotion, his tears is visceral.
Yeah, and it could be a very hammy line, like ripping up something and going, "Not guilty."
Yeah.
But he delivers it in a really convincing way. And it like I said, it could have been so hammy, like him dropping to his knees and writhing in pain, going, "Not guilty," as he finally breaks. But yeah, they do it really well.
Yeah.
And after convincing the jury to give a not guilty verdict, Fonda walks over to his nemesis and he puts his coat on for him.
Yeah.
And it sort of shows that despite the extent to which they've argued, that there's no hard feelings there.
Yeah.
Your best mate. I'm sorry for making you rip up the picture of your son. The only picture that you
yeah,
had.
exactly. There's no copies back then. Yeah, it makes it even more powerful. But no,
get it again.
It kind of makes the argument for, you know, bipartisanship, like, you know, not being divided across these right-wrong lines. Like, at the end of the day, we are just human as we are. And I like the fact that these have all been jurors, 1 to 12. And then at the end, Fonda and the old guy trade names. I think he's Davis, he's McCardle. And then they just walk off. That's it.
Yeah, well, there's actually, bar those two names, there's no names in the film.
No.
It's always the kid on trial or the old man witness or the woman witness. And the lack of names, like, it signifies sort of that it's not about the individual. It's about the group and its ability to make good decisions. And that's sort of what democracy is. And it does a really good job of hammering that point home. By just excluding the names, and it's not something you realise, but even if you look up the cast list on IMDb, it's all like Juror 1, Juror 2, Juror 3. Mm-hmm. And it's just a really nice study of democracy and how, you know, you might not always agree with a decision, but we're all trying to work towards a positive thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a bit more complicated than that, of course, because it is one individual who saves the day. But he's the one who understands his duty as a jury member, which is to make sure that the group actually serves justice.
Yeah, and I love in a classic 57 affectation at the end, we get the score playing and we just get the close-ups of all the 12 guys. And it just makes you appreciate, you know, how great they all are. Let's just go through them quickly. So, Juror 1 is the high school coach, you know, the guy who sort of chairs the whole thing. Number 2 is the meek bank worker. Number 3 is it's Lee J. Cobb, the antagonist. Then we get the stockbroker with the glasses. We get the slum guy who's a fan of the Baltimore. And the baseball guy, let's get hidden a crowbar every day or something like that. The respectable house painter, the baseball guy, Fonda himself, the old man, the sort of other villain, I guess, who eventually goes on his rant and everyone turns their back on him, the watchmaker, and then Don Draper, for all effects, the ad guy, who's another interesting character.
Drew them rice pops, didn't he?
Yeah.
When he's drawn that advert, Tom, and he turns it over, I just thought, what the fuck is that? There's no way anyone would ever buy that shit.
It looks so terrible. And like when they're playing noughts and crosses as well. It's a great little thing early on. But yeah, I mean, that's 12 Angry Men, really. I mean, that's a film that, you know, I'll always love. Again, I don't want to say it's like my favourite film ever, because I don't know if I really have one. Maybe Toy Story. I know it's a cliche. I'd maybe say Toy Story probably is my favourite film. But, I mean, what did you think, Def? Because obviously you'd never seen it before. Yeah,
I did quite enjoy it. It's quite dour and downtrodden throughout, but I like that it's got a nice happy ending, and Fonda walks away with a smile. You know, he's convinced these people to let this guy get away with murder, and he's laughing about he's the devil, that guy. And that's how I interpreted it. So make sure you check out my 12 Angry Men Ending Explained video, in which I discuss how he's the devil. But yeah, it's a really timeless piece, and it definitely still holds up today, which I don't think a lot of films from that era do. And it's influenced a lot of drama, the acting especially. And yeah, I really, really did enjoy it. Normally when I buy a film and I don't like it, I just put it on eBay straight away. But this one's still in the bookcase, Tom.
Wow.
So good recommendation.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoy it. I just on IMDb actually, Jack Klugman, who played the guy from The Slums, he died on Christmas Eve, 2012. None of the 12 Angry Men are alive today.
Wow.
That was it.
Because he was Quincy, wasn't he?
Was he?
I think he was Quincy, yeah.
Oh, he
was also
yeah.
in an episode of The Twilight Zone.
Okay, cool.
He played like some snooker guy in that, who basically, brilliant episode of The Twilight Zone. He was a great snooker player, but there was a guy who'd come before him who was dead. I think it was called Fats, but he was a fat guy.
Yeah.
And he was like, you'd never be good enough to beat Fats back in his day. And anyway, Fats, the ghost of Fats, comes down and plays him. Because Fats has basically been going through eternity and people have been challenging his ghost. And Fats lets him win so that he can take his place and live forever, having to challenge everyone who challenges his ghost. But brilliant episode, Tom.
Cool episode, yeah, cool idea.
Yeah.
But what are you tackling next? What's the next one?
Well, I've got to tell you what, we had a word about this, Tom, about you taking control of the podcast. I'm not bloody finished. So I had a couple of comments come in, and by a couple I mean one, from Tony Madness, who said 12 Angry Men should be watched by all new filmmakers. Its use of one location instead of basing it... its use of one location instead basing it around character types is top level. It's also very relatable as an American, as most of us have to serve jury duty at least once in our lifetimes. It's one of the greatest films of all time. So thank you very much, Tony Madness, for doing that.
Tony, yeah.
A couple of tidbits as well for you here, Tom. So keep these to yourself. You already mentioned about the director making them say their lines over and over without filming them, and this was to give them a real taste of what it would be like to be cooped up in a room with the same people. Again, we talked about the 41 seconds. It's actually 31 seconds in the movie on that crime reenactment. And because the film failed to make a profit, Henry Fonda never received his deferred salary. So originally he was like, no, just make sure you make the film, then pay me after. But it never made a profit. But despite this setback, he always regarded it as one of his best. He said that this was one of the 3 best films that he's ever made, with the other being The Grapes of Wrath and the Oxbow Incident that you mentioned before.
Oh, the Oxbow Incident. Cool that you mentioned that. Yeah, Grapes of Wrath. That is classic. That's a good movie.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's the podcast. Thanks, guys, for checking it out, and make sure you subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, I mean, your non-video stuff get no views. And if doing 12 Angry Men, it's gonna get fucking 12 views. Like, if it's more than 12 views, I'm gonna be impressed. It's gonna be Yardman Wilderness, and that's about it. Shout out Yardman. So, but Def, it's always a pleasure. It's been great to be on here, and I want to urge people. Again, I'm being host now. I'm sorry, but we do the Watchmen podcast, Battle Art Resume. Check out Def's channel. I'll let you close it out, man.
Well, you're doing a good job, Tom. I don't want to spoil you. Basically, keep an eye out for the next episode. We'll be discussing The Room and The Disaster Artist with Adam Feldman.
Oh, wow. That's going to be a good episode.
Tom, I hate that film. But, yeah, we're watching The Room, guys, on a podcast called The Greatest Movie Ever. So I'm definitely taking the name seriously. But Tom, have you got anything you want to promote yourself? You've already promoted The Watchmen. What about your other podcast? What about your Twitter? Tell the people.
Yeah, follow us at Battle Art Resume. Battle Art Resume is always there. I've been doing it for almost 3 years now.
That's crazy.
I know, it's fucking crap. We did our first episode like early 2016 or some shit like that. So yeah, it's. Do
you feel like life wouldn't be the same if you stopped doing it?
I feel like it's gone on too long, to be honest with you. You
That's a
know,
burden.
maybe I'll take a little, but I'm always gonna fucking podcast. I know that for a fact. I've already got 2 or 3 podcasts that I want to do in the future. You know, that I'm gonna start doing maybe when I'm a little bit older. I've got like retirement podcasts that I want to do as well. So yeah, I'm always podcasting. But yeah, Battle Resume's there, and anyone that's into Metallica as well. I'm going through every single Metallica song in order with fans from around the world. That's always fun. It's a nice break as well. It's always like 20-30 minutes, pretty quick fire. I've had loads of good guests. I've had the guy who produced some of their biggest albums from the 80s. I've had the father of their legendary deceased bass player, Ray Burton. So yeah, if you're interested in Metallica at all, definitely check that out. What else is there really? I've been on a few other podcasts here and there, but you guys don't really care about that. But that's about me, Dev.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for stopping by. And it's a good night from me.
It's a good night from Kwei.